This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. My voice is a bit hoarse at the minute because I was at the footy last night screaming for the Tigers and they lost yet again. What can I do? Nothing. I can just continue doing this introduction to a chat with the great Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest and now Elegant Weapons. And I'm going to say right off the bat that I was certainly not a skeptic, but I was looking forward to the possibility of this chat. It's clearly happened. And if you're on the fence, this is one of those chats that'll sway you in Richie's favour because he's a tremendous fella. He's doing such a great job in Judas Priest, but it's always great to hear the man behind the guitar share his thoughts on so many topics. The catalyst for the chat is due to the launch of an album called Horns for a Halo. It is the debut for Elegant Weapons. We discuss the album, the partners, the comrades that he's brought with him for the journey, such as Rex Brown from Pantera. And then we go behind the scenes. We learn all about how he joined Judas Priest. That's the origin story. I don't know whether that's out there. It might be, but I certainly haven't read it. But he talks about that here, and he discusses watching the Iron Maiden machine up close and personal when he was touring with Lauren Harris back in the day. Plenty of other topics that we dive into. And I've got a tune to share with you. If you are listening via the podcast apps, you'll hear Horns for a Halo, the title track from the album. It's the best song on the album, in my opinion. Killer tune. One of the best of the years so far. And once it's done, we'll dive into the conversation. You people on YouTube, you know the deal. I can't play music on the platform lest I get a copyright strike. So here is the chat for you people on YouTube, and here is the tune for you people on the podcast apps, and once it's done, we'll dive into the conversation. Either way, let's go.
Andrew.
Richie, brother, how are you, mate?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Great. I owe you an apology for last week, brother. Buddy work just got on top of me, and I worked right the way through our scheduled time, so I appreciate this opportunity to have a good conversation with you.
That's all right. It happens. And it might not be a good conversation. You never know.
I've listened to your other ones, mate. No, you're good at holding a conversation, so I appreciate that. But that'd be the first. That'd be the first point, mate. Have you found that people this time around, or I suppose, is this your first time you've had an opportunity to have a chat about something that's all yours?
Yeah, I think so. Especially on this level, and obviously. The band I'm connected to, obviously people are interested in it in a different way. You come from a legacy band like Priest, people are going to show an interest in what you do on the side, so there's definitely a different level of interest because of that, for sure.
Yeah, gotcha. Yep. Now, to my ears, with this album here, Horns for a Halo, it sounds like you've applied every bit of your experience in songwriting chops from your time in Priest. But I could be wrong here because people might not realise that I actually watched you, I'm sure I did back in the day, back in 2008, performing with Lauren Harris when you were touring with Iron Maiden. So are these songs that you even had the genesis of way back then?
Not as far back as that, no. But, I mean, you're always... even back then, I mean, you're always kind of looking. I was in bands, I was in cover bands, I was in original bands, honing those skills, like how to, you're always learning how to write a better song, and still am, even with Priest, like how do you write a better song? How do you write a better album? How do you make it better, quote unquote? Better is a subjective term, obviously, but, as a writer, how do you write a better one than the last one? And it was the same back then, and it will always be that way. So, these songs have been around since a couple of years before COVID, maybe. Ideas here and there, song starts, maybe melodies, maybe choruses, and I think it was the pandemic really that I was able to consolidate all those ideas and get some new ones written. And put them together and see what I got. Did I have an album or an EP or a band that I could put together, and went from there, really.
It sounds like a killer 70s style heavy metal album, but with that great modern production that Andy's known for. So just for the listener's perspective, okay, you've nailed the Dio era Sabbath with the title track, Horns for a Halo, but you've also got other songs where you've got Uriah Heep, of course, Priest, you've got Deep Purple as well in there, but there's some other more obscure new wave of British heavy metal references like Satan and stuff in there as well. So is that just the way you write, or did you actually have to go, I'm going to write something that wouldn't have been out of place circa 1978?
No, nothing's conscious. I mean, primarily to me, I'll sit down with the guitar and it's the riff first. It's the riff or the melody. And it all comes from that era. Like you said, you know, I grew up in a certain era. I was influenced by, I mean, more than just 70s and 80s and 90s rock. I mean, there was a lot of pop influence in there as well. I grew up in the early 80s and there was a lot of, you know, there's Duran Duran floating around and Ultravox and Roxy music and all that sort of stuff that, you know, obviously isn't evident on this record, but, you know, you're influenced by your influences and that's just, you can't help that, you know. But as far as the rock influence, it was my dad's influence of, you know, Deep Purple and Lizzie and Sabbath, Hendrix, and that stuff is who you are, and you can't really escape it. And that's what comes out when you strap on the guitar. So it's not a conscious thing to hit those notes stylistically. It's just what comes out.
I'm pretty sure we're about the same age. So how did you avoid grunge? It would have been easy, surely, for you to start a Soundgarden style band or a Pearl Jam style band, but you kept at it with the chops that you've got, and you've got this great 70s and early 80s style lead vibe.
I wasn't really interested. I mean, I came into sort of, the early 90s for me was my early teens. So that was when grunge was sort of taking hold. So I was getting into heavier music then, and I was looking for stuff that was going to be the next level of Lizzie and Purple and the stuff. So for me, it was Maiden, Priest, Pantera, Metallica. That was, for me, what I was attracted to musically, because I was brought up on the twin guitar of Lizzie. You know, that to me, the next level of that was Maiden and Priest. You know, so that's where I went. The Nirvana thing and the grunge thing and even the Soundgarden I got a little bit more. It sounded a bit more like Sabbath, you know, in places. But it didn't really interest me. It wasn't technical enough. It didn't kind of satisfy my hunger for what I wanted to hear and what I wanted to play. Whereas, you know, Pantera did and Metallica did, and I kind of carried on that vein. And then I got into cover bands and stuff like that, and we were playing Lizzie and Maiden and Priest. So I got you know, stuck on that bent, really. But again, it's kind of what I grew up on. And the stuff that I listened to in my teens was an evolution. I felt was an evolution of what I was introduced to as a kid.
Yeah. Were you ever inspired by death and black metal? I mean, I've got a Cradle of Filth T-shirt on, but I specifically love the 90s era, Stuart Anstis' guitar playing in particular. But did that grab your attention?
Not really. I think image-wise, definitely. I think it was hard not to be influenced some way by the way that whole image was. But musically, no. I mean, you know, melodically, you know, I'm a big fan of melody, and I think melodically, you know, it falls short for me, that stuff. You know, but that's part of the attraction of it for some people. But I'm a big fan of melody, so yeah, for me, it fell short. But the image, and I get all that, but it wasn't really high on my radar.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Look, there, but for the grace of God, I go there and ask these sort of questions. So sign of the cross first. But look, I've spoken to Rex before, and he just comes across as an absolute pain in the ass, to be honest with you. And I know Mark Eglinton's had some issues with him as well, but you haven't. So how do you find that you get along with Rex? And can you tell me about your friendship with him?
Well, I remember I met Rex years ago at an EMG Pickups. It was a NAMM show. I met him at a NAMM show, and we were there with EMG Pickups. So I met him then. And then we got closer. I think it was just before the pandemic. a couple of years before the pandemic, we got closer. He was up near where I lived with some friends, and we got together. We hung out a bit, and we got closer after that. And again, like, I called him up one day and I sent him some songs. I said, I've got these songs. Would you be interested in putting down the bass on the record? And he loved the songs. He dug the songs, and he was able to put the songs down. And obviously, the Pantera thing happened, and he's doing that now, which is great. But I was just grateful to him that he was able to do the record, But I mean, for me, when I got the bass tracks off of Rex, that's when the record really came to life, really. Up until then, I'd got like programmed bass, like demo bass that I'd programmed with a keyboard just to have something there, just to make it sound.
Just some guide tracks, yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Exactly that. But when he sent them back and it was like real bass, not only was it real bass, but it was like Rex Brown real bass. It was like, dirty and gritty, and it was just like, I don't know. It just moved in the right way. It was just like, that's exactly what I needed. So I'm really thankful to him to be able to do that. So I'm not speaking properly.
No, all good, brother. Yeah, no, it sounded more than a couple of years ago now. He was just in a bit of a funk around the Pantera association, the legacy, and even bass playing. He just did not want to talk about it, which is crazy because, to your point, he's a magnificent bass player, such a groovy, melodic yet heavy at the same time. He's one of the he unlocked the mystery of how to play bass in a band with Dime. And Dime, you almost didn't need anybody else. It's just Dime, right? So I'm glad you did it, mate, because we all might owe you a debt of gratitude on that one there, because he's now back out there and playing bass again.
Well, I can't speak for Rex, but I mean, I think we all go through periods where, we've had enough of it sometimes. Whatever it is we do, we've had enough. And sometimes we have to go through that to come back to it. I don't know if that was Rex's case, but I know obviously he was playing guitar and singing at some point in his own band.
Yeah, that's when I copped him.
I can't speak for him.
Yeah, that's when I copped him. And of course, I was honouring the fact that I can't remember the name of the Smoke on This. There you go. I remember it. And it's not a bad album, but frankly, he's like me, mate. I'm a bassist who turned to guitar too, and we just don't have the same vibe. A bit like a guitarist playing bass. You know what I'm talking about. No doubt you can shred on the bass, but you can tell when someone plays bass as opposed to guitar and vice versa. And he just sort of he didn't want to sort of talk a bit. Conversation's a bit like the one I'm having with you. It just sort of goes where it sort of goes. Definitely we've got a reason to talk a catalyst, as I say in my introductions, and we always honour that. But he just didn't want to talk about it. I thought it was sad because his bass line to Floods is just all time. I mean, it's the heavy metal bass line in many ways, isn't it?
I mean, not only was he playing with Dime, he was playing with Vinny as well, and he was like the lukewarm water, to coin a phrase from Derek Smalls. But he fit in there, a sound and a groove, and he was the glue between those two guys. And he's a legendary bass player for more than one reason. His sound, his swagger, and I'm glad he's back up with Pantera playing bass again and delivering that to the world. Really, I'm glad he's back on the bass, playing the bass and moving some serious air.
Yeah, likewise too. But look, something else. I think Ronnie's one thing, and I had a great conversation, a couple of hours conversation with Ronnie just when he got into the not Deep Purple, Blackmore situation there. And sorry, I'll get to that in a sec, but I wanted to talk to you about Chris Williams, because he's a hell of a drummer, mate. And I noticed that a few years ago when he first did the Accept album there. So how did you hook up with him?
Well, I don't live that far away from Christopher. And, Christopher actually recorded the record before Scott did. I couldn't get we were coming out of lockdowns. There were still restrictions on travel. I wanted to get the recording started. And I knew Chris, before, as a friend, really, before I recorded with him. And I called him up and said, listen, I want Scott to be part of this, but I need to get the recording started. Is there any way you could do it for us? And then I'll get Scott in later to redo the drums. And he did. He came over to the studio and he put the drums down. And he was an absolute beast. And he was actually on the versions that the record label heard. And I sent out, and it actually, Nuclear Blast ended up, we ended up signing with Nuclear Blast, but they heard some of the early demos and they loved it even back then. And we got Scott in later on and he redone the drums or whatever. So Christopher was connected with the record early on. So when Scott couldn't do it, it's like, well, it's a no-brainer. I've got to ask Christopher. He's an absolute monster. He's a great guy. Why he's connected with the record? Why wouldn't I at least ask him if he wants to be a part of it moving forward? And I asked him, and he was well up for it. And actually, we just flew into the UK yesterday, me and him, and we're starting this tour of Europe tomorrow. And I couldn't be happier to have him on board, to be honest.
Oh, so tight. So on that point, did any of the songs change because of his involvement then?
Well, I think songs change naturally. I've got Davey Rimmer in as well, obviously on the bass. Rex is doing Pantera, so I had to get Davey Rimmer in on the bass as well. And I think naturally songs evolve and they grow and they move naturally. I think they should. Depending on the people, you get two different people, you get a different bassist and a drummer in. I think they should change. I think if they don't, you've got the wrong bass player and drummer. I think they should have a character that they bring into the band that makes it do something. Obviously, they're the same songs fundamentally, but a drummer and a bass player hopefully have their own character that they change it slightly, So there's little things that Christopher and Davey do that bring their own flavour to the songs, without a doubt. And Christopher, he's such a monster, man. He's attentive. He listens. He's different to Scott, but he's his own character. So yeah, he changes them up.
Well, you're playing with two of the best at the minute, with Scott Travis as well. I mean, with all due respect to it's focusing on the two there. I mean, at the moment, you're probably playing with two of the premier metal drummers. Certainly still plying the board. So can you tell me about your dynamic as a guitarist and how you fit in between the both of them? In other words, in what way are they different?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, all of the guys connected with him, they just make me sound good, I mean, I've been playing with Scott now for 12 years. And I think when you think of Scott Travis and Christopher Williams and the bands that they're in, you think of, the technical side of things, but they've both got an incredible groove and a feel, it's like Van Halen, you think of Eddie Van Halen, you think of the tapping and the technical side of things, but there's an incredible bluesy side to Eddie's playing that a lot of people don't forget, but it's not the first thing you think about, So I think there's a lot of groove that goes into both of their playing, a lot of musicality that goes into both of those guys playing. And they're always looking for, not necessarily the most technical approach, but the most musical approach, which we're all looking for. Bass players, guitar players, what's best for the song, what's best for the groove, what feels best. So they're both a pleasure to play with. Because they're both trying to play for the song ultimately,
Yeah, agreed, yeah. Ronnie, I'll get to him eventually, get to him now. I think you blokes were eventually going to find each other because the best generally do. Cream rises to the top. So can you tell me about how your friendship with him started and how you invited him to be part of the project?
Yeah, I mean, I was made aware of Ronnie. I think it was Scott called me from Europe and he was out. He was doing some dates with Thin Lizzy, and they were playing with Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, and Ronnie was singing. And I think it was the first time a lot of us were introduced to Ronnie on the world stage. Myself, anyway. So he said, "You got to check the singer out." So I checked Ronnie out, and like a lot of us, was blown away. He was singing all the Dio stuff, all the Rainbow stuff, flawlessly, And from there, I think he opened up for Priest in Spain on the Firepower tour, if I'm not mistaken. So I met him there. And when his name came up for this, it was a no-brainer, really. Because I think this is the type of music. It was important for me to have the influences shine through. Where it's obvious where the influences come from. And I don't think they should be hidden. I think they should be loud and proud. They're 70s, some 60s. There's some Hendrix in there, some 70s, some 80s, some 90s. that's who I am, and I think anything else will be disingenuous, you know. But it's 2023, and I want it to be a relevant record. So all those things, and I think Ronnie's voice is that as well. You can hear where those influences come from, but he's a modern singer in 2023, and I thought it was a no-brainer to at least call him and see if he'd be up for doing it, you know. And I think we both came from the same place. We're both in legacy acts. I come from Priest, he comes from Rainbow, Christopher comes from Accept, Davey comes from Uriah Heep. And in Ronnie's case, when I was talking to him, we both understand that the reality is these bands aren't going to be around forever. So how can we take the DNA and the legacy from the bands that we've been in and take it into the future when they decide to call it a day one day? You know, because Priest and Rainbow are going to be around, the music's going to be around for the next 500 years. But we're not. So how do we take that forward into the future? And we both were on the same page in that regard. So he got where I was coming from musically, and he got where I think we were both on the same page of what we wanted to do career-wise, professionally, and in a band sense, where we wanted to go as a band. So that was an exciting thing to consider as well.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, he told me the story about how God, I got a mental blank. What's his bloody name? The greatest guitarist almost ever. What's his name? Deep Purple. I've got bloody Richie
Blackmore.
Sorry, it almost flew away there. Yeah, he told me the story about how we tested him with ice cream. Has he told you that story?
I'm not sure. If he has, I've forgotten.
He was in a restaurant, I think, and he tested him. I can't remember whether it was along the lines of he wanted to see if he wanted to continue drinking or whether he wanted to have dessert, because apparently Rich is a huge ice cream fan, but he agreed with his flavour of ice cream. Next time you chat with him, get him to tell you the story. But I think that was the moment that he knew that he might have had, some sort of graft with Richie and it might actually work.
That's funny, man. I mean, there's some Richie Blackmore stories that you hear. They're like stuff of legend. You know, he apparently was a bit of a prankster, and you hear like little stories here and there. I think Lemmy told one once. I can't remember. I don't want to tell it in case I get it wrong and the internet will rip me to shreds. But there's a couple of things out there. He's just known for being a mythical prankster, which is just adds to the enigma of Richie Blackmore.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You and Andy at this point, have you evolved beyond the point where you're workmates effectively in a lot of ways and you're just drinking buddies that just happen to work with each other?
Well, we communicate pretty much every day, me and Andy, whether it's about the album we're working on with Priest or, we're doing something with Elegant Weapons, or whether it's a guitar amp or a guitar or, a tour or a set list we're putting together. We're communicating all the time. So it's kind of like we talk about it like it's our life, and we're fortunate to be in a place where that is our life, and we're able to live our life like that and make a living in a sense doing this. It won't be like that forever, but I'm 43. I think he's 53. We're still young enough to do it and live every day like it and balance family life with it. So we're lucky, really, and we love what we do. It's part of who we are. And we're just lucky to be able to do that, I think. And, until we can't do it anymore, I think, how can you not wake up every day? And if you can, even if you didn't do it as a profession, people do it like they go to work, come back home and get on the guitar, and they do it because they love it. We love it, and we're able to do it 24/7. So we do it 24/7. And so we're always on the phone. We're always messaging about it. And have you seen this piece of gear that can do this? Or, what do you think about this? Or I've got this sound from this, or I've got this riff, or I sent him some guitar tracks over for the next Elegant Weapons record that I've been working on. It's like it's constant. And why shouldn't it be? You know what I mean? That's what we do, and that's what we live for.
Yeah, gotcha. Mate, I've got plenty more questions, but I'll just do a time check. Have you got another chat in 4 minutes' time or thereabouts?
No, I'm good for a few minutes.
Okay, sweet. All right, yeah. Mike Exeter, got along really well with him when I spoke to him, and a lovely fella. What are your memories of working with him and Firepower?
Love Mike. He works on the Redeemer of Souls record as well.
That's right, yeah.
So he co-produced it with Glenn, and then he worked as an engineer on the Firepower record along with Andy and Tom Allen. So he's been a part of the last two records that I've done with Priest. But Mike's great. He's a great pianist as well. So I think there was a piano part on a song called Guardians, I think it was called, on the Firepower record, which I made a hash job of just for the demo, and then Mike came in and played it properly, and I never knew he was a piano player, and it really blew me away. So he's a great engineer, great producer, and a great piano player as well. So and he's a great dude, as you said.
He should be more well known, I feel. He's worked on some classic albums, no doubt. I mean, those two albums that you worked on too. And but I wish he was more of a household name. That's all, just for him, because he's such a nice fella.
No, you're right. You're right. I agree with that. He's worked on some great albums, but you wouldn't know it. As you said, you're absolutely right.
Mm. The last few years have really brought us some great guitarists, and you're one of them. But the other's Simon McBride. So have you ever had a chat to him?
I haven't. We've breezed past each other. Like, we were in an airport, and Purple. We were about to take off, and Purple just landed. So they breezed past. We said quick hellos, and they were gone. But yeah, he's a fantastic player. He got, in my opinion, he's got the right balance between, the shred. He's got enough shred, but it's the right type of shred. That's a hard thing to do, especially in a band like Deep Purple. If you over shred, or it's the wrong type of shred, you're going to get shredded to bits. People ain't going to appreciate it. But there's something that he does that it's like tasteful shred. It's the right type of shred, and he got it right, in my opinion. I think in many people's opinions. So yeah, phenomenal player, and he fit in really well.
Very astute observation, but it also hints at what you might have had to deal with too. I mean, did you? I don't trawl the forums. Enough of my stuff gets picked up by Blabbermouth, and I read the bloody comments there, but you don't pay much attention to the troll and the bullshit stuff. But how have you managed that aspect of it? Because I'm sure you're aware of what people write and what they say.
Of course, that's just the nature of the beast these days. I think you got to, for me, people having an opinion. I mean, you can't ask for. You put stuff out there, people are going to have an opinion, good and bad. That's all you can ask for, really. Coming into a situation after 40 years, it's going to be shocking for anyone who's followed the band for that long. It'll be shocking for me. If it was something I followed for that long, and then the situation changed, I'd have an opinion about it as well. But I just tried to kind of uphold the legacy of what went before, and kind of put your own thing down moving forward. That's all you can do, really. If you get it wrong, people will let you know. But it's the band. If you're getting something wrong, it's the band that you listen to, really. They know how they want it to sound, and but I think the fans will let you know if there was something wrong. It's not the troll sites, as you said. That's not where you make your decisions. It's it's the fans, and the fans that keep coming, and they've been nothing but predominantly welcoming over the years, and you go with that, really. You give it 1,000%, and hopefully it resonates with them, and you move forward.
Well, you're doing a fucking awesome job, mate. You should be congratulated on that, because not many people could have stepped into the shoes that you stepped into and do the job that you're doing right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. You've been to Australia, as I mentioned, outside of the Priest Machine, and with the Priest Machine as well. But you've seen two of the most iconic. You're in one of the most iconic heavy metal bands ever, and you've seen another one up close. So Iron Maiden, I'm talking about, of course. So what are your observations on how the two camps differ?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, Maiden. I mean, I don't know much about the inner workings of Maiden, so I wasn't on the inside of that, really. Obviously, I'm on the inside of the Priest thing, so I couldn't really say. But I mean, they've both had lots of similarities. It's uncanny, really. Some of the similarities, the singer situations, and they've both gone through grunge, the grunge period that you mentioned earlier on. And then Maiden are just on Maiden are, I don't know, it's just another level, Maiden. They're playing stadiums, and everyone always talks about a Maiden Priest tour. That would be the ultimate.
Oh, man. People want that,
I mean?
right?
Yeah, it'll be so cool, man. I mean,
But
just
have
the
Elegant
Maiden
Weapons
Priest.
open up. Have Elegant Weapons
Oh,
as it's got to do that, you know.
Exactly. But and then we start talking about the big four. There was the big four, the thrash big four, and then people start talking about the UK big four. Sabbath aren't around anymore, but if they could reconvene for something like that, so it'll be Priest, Maiden, Sabbath, and then we can add some more to that. But no, I mean there's a lot of similarities, but there must be a lot of differences. But I mean, I'm a massive Maiden fan. I'm a massive Priest fan, but I couldn't talk about the inner workings because I honestly don't know.
What was it like working with Lauren back then? Was that your introduction to the world stage?
I would say so, definitely on that level. Yeah, I mean, as far as they were touring on their own plane, and and it was a 737. It wasn't like a private jet or anything. It was a 737 with the gear in the back and touring different countries, and it was massive, So, and then tour buses and stuff, and it was my first experience with that. And I mean, it teaches you that wherever you go, whatever band you're in, even with Priest, you're always going to go somewhere where it's a country or a city or a town or somebody that hasn't seen you or the band you're in. And you can never take that for granted, whether it's Lauren or Priest or Elegant Weapons. We came down to New Zealand with Priest, I think it was 2015, and they'd never been there before, with me or otherwise. So It was... you can never take your foot off the gas and never take for granted that, they've been around for 50 years. This is easy. You can't ever think like that. There's always going to be, so my point is with Lauren, you've got to go out there and convince as many fans as possible that, or try and take them with you, give your best performance, give it 1,000%. And with Priest in 2015, New Zealand, no one there had seen Priest before. So it's give 1,000%, make your best impression, and do the best job you can representing those songs. And that's no different, So those elements are very much the same. Obviously, the circumstances that you're touring under are very different, but the fundamentals are the same. You go there, you represent what that band means to the band and what it means to the fans, if you have them, and give 1,000%,
You must have come with a letter of recommendation from the Zeus of metal himself, Steve Harris, into the Priest camp.
Well, he didn't know. I told him. I called him up and said, Priest have called me, but they actually went through the Maiden office to get my number.
Right.
Initially, they went through a friend of mine and a colleague who gave him an old number. He didn't know. Obviously, I hadn't seen him for a few years. He gave him an old number, but luckily, fortunately for me, they were persistent and they went through the Maiden production office and got my number through them. So, when I got the gig, Steve was one of the first. I told Lauren first of all because obviously I had to leave her band, and then Steve was the second person I called and said, "This is the situation." And he couldn't have been happier,
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's a great cosign, though, isn't it, to have that? I mean, you've gone in with Lauren, you've done such a great job there that you just stood out and you were the obvious candidate, probably the only candidate, to be honest, to step into the shoes that you stepped into.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were other people they were considering, but I was just lucky to be considered again for the position. Lucky to be up there auditioning, and lucky to get it, and lucky to be here talking to you today. 12 years later, it's been quite the journey, I can tell you.
Was that the dream that you had as a young fella? Is it what you're doing right now, or is this well beyond it?
Well, it always is. I think it's always the you aspire to be. That is the dream, but you never think it's going to be reality. I think you aspire to be as good as your heroes, and you see videos of them touring the world, and that's what you want to do. But I don't think, I think you aspire to be as good as them. So if you ever got the call, you're ready, but you never think that call's going to come in. And then sometimes it does, and you better be ready, otherwise you don't get many opportunities like that, I don't think. But yeah, I think that's always the dream, but you never think it's really going to happen.
And it did, and you're doing a great job. As I said, this album here, Horns for a Halo, it stands on its own, to be honest with you. It's a great album. The Priest association notwithstanding here, it's an album all of your own. You can hear that. As I've spoken about up top, you've got some magnificent musicians along for the ride. I mean, the thing now is, mate, I can't wait for the next one, because I think from here you've got yourself a platform for this band here, Elegant Weapons, to really sort of stand out on their own.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Now, it's hard now, because now you release something and it's well received. Now you got to try and not fuck it up. You know what I mean? You know, there's some expectation now which we didn't have before in the same way. So no, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for the support.
Keep doing what you do, brother. Hopefully I'll see you down here in either band sometime in the near future. But thanks so much again for the chat.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks again, man. I hopefully see you soon.
Absolutely, brother. No worries.
Thanks, bro. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gents, a conversation with Richie Faulkner from Elegant Weapons and Judas Priest. What a nice fella. Best of luck to him. Don't think he needs it. I think he's got it. No doubt. All right, if you like that one, there are many more just like it over at scarsandguitars.com. And if you like listening, maybe you like reading too, because I've written a book, Scars and Guitars Volume 1, Conversations from the World of Heavy Metal, Hard Rock and Beyond. Click on the link in the banner on the website and you'll be shifted, transported, to a marketplace of your choice. And you can download a sample, and if you do complete the purchase, please hit me up. Just on that, some people have definitely bought it, because I've got ratings on Amazon. I don't control that. So I've got a couple of 5s, a 4 and a 3, just to be transparent. So somebody out there thought, well, I could probably do better, and other people thought, yeah, it was pretty good. I'll take it all. It's all great feedback, particularly if you paid for it. Very rare in this day and age. All this content creation, it is done for you, the consumer. And you're all cool people. I'm not suggesting for a moment you're not, but we all do this for free, right, us podcasters? There is no monetary value alone in doing it. We do this because it is our passion. Thank God I've got a great job. I love my job. Really happy with things at the moment, I've got to say. All right, thanks for listening to this point. I've got some more information to share with you about the book in a moment, but before we get to that, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Until next time, it is a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
You know, if you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
My name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.